morning, everybody. Welcome to CBI at 10. My name's Liz Mosley. I'm an editor and partner at Tortoise Media. It's lovely to have you all here and to be joined by our esteemed panel for a conversation about the thing that is occupying a lot of emotional and practical and logistical energy, I think, for people who are trying to lead businesses through and hopefully now out of the pandemic. I've just been told that today is in fact the 1-year anniversary of when I think it was the WHO declared this a global pandemic. So congratulations to everybody and happy anniversary to us all. It's a huge thing. It's a huge deal. When we first went into lockdown and lots of people were sent home, we sort of had no time to think about it because you just had to get on and do it and then sort of bundle your way through as best you could. Of course, now we have a bit more of a sense of a time scale, depending on where you are in the country. So there is a little bit more that we can do to plan. And what this morning is about is exploring considerations, ways of planning, maybe models that have been shown to work or work less well for different types of businesses. So I'm going to start with Matthew, if I can. Good morning, Matthew. Nice to see you. Why don't you just give us a bit of a framing? This is the hot topic. It's what's on everybody's minds. What's the CBI thinking on this? How are we approaching it?
Well, Liz, good morning, everyone. I mean, I think you're completely right. This is the hot topic, and I think there are sort of many buckets of interest in this, if you like. Clearly, individuals are thinking about it, what it means for them as an individual, and there's a range of views there. You know, we've got plenty of people who are sort of absolutely desperate to get back to the office, get back to a semblance of normality. And equally, we've got some people who are, for very good reasons, anxious about it, or kind of thinking, actually, this setup sort of works quite well for me. So there's a range of views going on for individuals, as well as practical considerations on people's minds. Some people have relocated. Do I take a new sort of rental property? What should I do about my travel arrangements, season ticket, etc.? So a whole set of issues for individuals. Then for businesses, critically, you know, the CBI's lane, everyone thinking about how do I approach this and plan effectively around it. And I think many are thinking through, look, there's a heap of stuff we're missing out on here, you know, the benefits of interaction and the spark that comes from that and everything. But also, you know, there are some upsides and people are thinking about it. Are there cost saving opportunities or other efficiencies to be had as well? And a heap of range of views from businesses. You know, only within the last week or so, we've had in the financial sector, Goldman Sachs expressing a view and a desire to get everyone back, particularly, I think, driven by making sure we do the right thing by a new intake of workers. And in that same sector, the likes of HSBC looking at shrinking their office footprint by something like 40%. BP in another sector in the news recently, 2 days a week, they're thinking on average there'll be people working from home and so on. So there's clearly no right answer on this, but I think the mainstream view, most of the CBI members that I talk to are anticipating some kind of hybrid setup going to be the case for the later this year and beyond. And then beyond individuals and businesses, of course, there are broader implications for the economy, for the retail, the leisure, the transport sectors in city centres and so on. All of them are keen to sort of try and anticipate and forecast how this is going to settle down, because it has a material impact on their business models too. So plenty of different factors to weigh up. I should say right from the outset, of course, you know, the government guidance for England at the moment, and it's similar elsewhere, is continuing to advise people to work from home where they can. So this is about thinking about what is the setup going to be when we are able to reopen, probably around kind of June time. That's what we're dealing with. So this session for me, Liz, is brilliant and timely because everyone's doing the planning now. But again, I should be really clear, this is not about sort of encouraging or campaigning for one particular outcome. What we're trying to do is help people to think it through, the questions that they should be asking themselves, and to help it plan. Because there are many reasons why it could be a good thing: productivity, employee engagement, talent attraction and retention, helping with diversity and inclusion. Get it right and it could be good for all of those things, but get it wrong and it might not be. So we're here to help, and what we've done, I hope people have seen, we've got this sort of new CBI guide launched earlier this week, and it takes people through the kind of questions that they should be asking themselves on issues around health and well-being, on recruitment and development, critically how you lead, manage and engage an organization, as well as a heap of stuff that's sort of operational and practical issues. And we're trying to help people ask the right questions and give them some pointers on each of those issues. And if they can get those right, then they might be thinking, okay, here's something that could work for me and I could entertain it in some way.
Brilliant, Matthew. Thanks so much. It's a great setup because this question, it seems quite simple, but the devil really is in the detail. When you start cracking open, the ramifications of trying one thing or another are really quite massive, and not just in terms of working culture, but in terms of the economics and the business model of the organisation. I'm going to come now, if I can, to Joanna Swash. Joanna, you're Chief Exec of Moneypenny, and we were, just before we started, we were having a really interesting conversation about that. Just before we start, just tell us a bit about your business. How many people, what do you do, where are you, that sort of thing. Set the scene for us.
Okay, so good morning and thank you very much for the invitation. We have about 1,100 people, both over our base in North Wales in Wrexham, about 800 people here in the office, and we have an office in Atlanta, a couple of hundred people there, and a smaller site in London as well. Very simple. We answer telephone calls and live chats for so many different companies, micro businesses, big brands, and we are the front face of their business.
So before this all happened, before, was your general setup everybody in the office every day? Was that how it ran, your organisation?
Absolutely. And as a growing business, what was keeping me awake, you know, more than 12 months ago now, beginning of last year, was, oh my goodness, I'm going to need more office space. How do I continue to grow at this pace in the 100,000 square foot that we're in now and in the States? And actually overnight, like you said in your opener, it just changed overnight, and it almost solved that problem, but created a multitude of others.
So connectivity is a huge part of the engine of your business. You need your people to be able to be connected online fast and able to sort of log. I suppose the sort of metrics that drive your business, you mentioned, you know, things like call duration and things like that. You'll be very closely tracking the output of your people in those measurable metrics.
Yeah, I mean, our number one priority is to do a brilliant job for our clients and their callers or the people on their website. You know, that's what we aim to deliver. How the business works, though, is a series of metrics, isn't it? That you've got to make sure that you have got them in the right place. So we all went home and created a work from home model in 2 to 3 weeks. Was that the best model we'd have made? Probably not. Would we have done it differently if we'd have had a bit more time? Yes, we can all hold our hands up to that one. So for me, it's about taking that big step back now, looking at the productivity measures that we've had over the past 12 months and say, is that good enough? Or how do I improve them? And how do I make sure I deliver a model that suits everybody, the business and profitability and growth, our customers in terms of quality, and our people in terms of what they expect out of an employer?
Yeah. And where are you in this sort of planning phase? Matthew outlined some of the many considerations. The idea, you're in Wales, first of all, so you don't have dates as such in the way that we have dates, albeit them subject to change. Where are you at in your sort of deciding how this is all going to pan out the next few months?
In my head, I would love to have this really beautiful laid out plan that looks all nice, that all the dates are there. But I think those days at the moment are just gone. And I think we have to be flexible. We have to be ready for anything. We have to be ready to pick up and move somewhere else if we need to. So in my head, I know what the roadmap looks like, in that we are working towards a hybrid work from home model. 60-something% of all our people are still at home now, and they will continue to be until the world's a safer place. We have been recruiting heavily. So we have an awful lot of new starters here in the building, which is really why we're open, is to suit those people who just cannot work from home. So yeah, our goal is a hybrid model, but not a one-size-fits-all approach. Everybody is an individual, and they are all going to need individual situations fixing or delivering for them.
And have you asked the staff what they want to do, what their preference is, or are you kind of going to do a bit more command and control based on what you've learned?
What I have learned is command and control doesn't work that often. We engage with our people a lot. I use Workplace, absolute huge fan of Workplace. So we use their bot capability a couple of months now to say, what do you want going forward? You've had this little flavour. We never thought we'd make it happen, but we have. What do you want? And there was a real equal split actually between people who want the opportunity to work from home and those that actually just want to be office based, but with the knowledge that in the future they could do. There's a big age divide on there, I'll have to say, is that the younger members of the team want to be in the office full time. It's a social life, whereas sometimes older people and people in different situations need to make their life work in a bit of a different way. And so we have to recognise that different people are going to want different things.
The generational divide, I think, is fascinating. We might come back to that. I'm going to come to you now, Jodie, if I can. You're Director of People and Ops at a big innovation company. Tell us a bit about your organisation. How many people? Where are you? How does it work?
Yes, so we are CPI, as I say, we're a technology and innovation company, predominantly based in the northeast, but a growing footprint in Glasgow and potentially in the northwest. We have just tipped the scales into 502 employees, so we're no longer a large small company, we're now a small large company, which is going to take some adjusting for us. But essentially, we're the catalyst that brings together industry, academia, government and business and investors to translate those ideas into commercially marketable products, and we do that by giving customer access to our talent, our assets, etc., etc. So it's all about connecting the dots between innovation and translation. So we have a good mix of workforce. We have about a third of our workforce who are in scientific, engineering, technical roles, another third that are work winning, and then the remaining third that are professional services. So we're quite diverse in terms of the types of roles that we recruit. And I would probably say about a third of our organisation have to be on site. The role is a site-based role. So when it comes to hybrid working or home working, we actually were a bit of ahead of the curve when I reflect back to last year. We started our business continuity process in January, expecting the pandemic to become global. So we actually had everyone working from home from about February. So we were a month ahead of the government guidelines, which was actually really helpful because we were able to sort of fix those teething problems before it became official. And then halfway through the year last year, we were getting from our employee surveys, our pulse surveys, we were getting a growing amount of feedback around this is great, can this become a permanent thing, what's the company's stance on making this much more permanent. So we took the strategic decision last year to move to hybrid working permanently, more officially, early. And the reason why we did that is, one, yes, the employees were asking, but two, we wanted 2021 to be very much focused on returning to business as usual. So let's get hybrid working off the table so that 2021 can be really focused on delivering the long-term strategy for the organisation.
Jodie, that's really fascinating. I'm interested in the sort of decision-making process and how you've designed it. You mentioned you've got a third of your crew. I'm guessing they're the science and engineering people.
Correct.
That have to be on site because they're operating a machine that they don't have at home. So I get that. With the other chunk of people, your 300 or so bods who can do their jobs from home. In an innovation company, you can do it on Zoom. But if you need to stick post-it notes on a wall or do a process map or whatever those things are, it's much, much harder. So how have you taken a view on, there's a sort of absolutely must be, and then there's a really it's better if you are in. How did you sort of balance off those things?
Yeah, two things. Technology. We had to make do with technology and create those virtual brown paper exercises, as I call them, which is a bit of a sticking plaster because they're not ideal for us, because getting around a table and really discussing and looking in the whites of people's eyes is really important to us to sort of solve the problems of industry. And we're sort of in a temporary situation at the moment because we're working towards the government roadmap to have full capacity by sort of the summertime, and what we're planning for is to create those collaboration spaces in the office so that people can come together informally and have those discussions. So we're going to move away from the sort of rows of desks, because we don't need as many now, and move away from individual meeting rooms and create those collaboration spaces so it can be much more informal and much more intuitive to have those conversations when people are in the office. And collaboration is one of our core values. Being connected is one of our core values. So it's really important for us that we create the environment for those working hybridly, so working from home, to connect using technology, and also create the environment physically in our facilities to enable that to happen as well. So it's both. We have to pull both levers.
I think the repurposing of the office space is quite an interesting one. But Matthew, it's a quick question for you, which is, do we know at this point in time what the social distance, what the sort of long-term social distancing requirements are going to be? Because when people are thinking about how many people can I fit versus how many people have to be, you know, it's quite a complex 3D jigsaw, isn't it, if people are going to still have to be 2 meters apart. Do we know what the answer to that is yet?
Yeah, so the answer at the moment, Liz, is it's still exactly that. And you're right, you know, as long as we're operating under that kind of setup, it is actually going to be a physical space issue. You know, no one's going to be able to get 100% of people in, probably using the same configuration as they had pre-pandemic. So that we know from the government's roadmap in England, at least. There is a social distancing review taking place that's sort of kicked off and underway now, led by the Cabinet Office, with input from around government. That will conclude by the June moment in the roadmap. It might conclude sooner, but the idea is that will conclude by June, and we'll know where the advice lands then, driven by health data and insights and so on. So we'll hear from that moment onwards what that setup is going to be. I think clearly the hope is, both from a sort of productive capacity point of view, other measures such as the vaccine and so on will eventually mean that requirement slips away, but we don't know exactly when that's going to be yet. So I think people should be planning for that to be the case at least until the midpoint of this year, and then we'll see where we land from there on.
Okay, thanks very much. That's helpful. Quick question to Jodie before I come back to Joanna, because I want to talk about this intergenerational thing that we mentioned before. But Jodie, a quick question from Nikki Becker, which is, what technology do you use to do those brown paper exercises? What's the piece of kit that you found is best to sort of do virtual brainstorm stuff?
I won't say which one is best, because there's loads out there, and I've jumped between all of the different ones depending on which forum in. Our system of choice is Microsoft Teams and all of the different apps that come with Office 365. An interesting point to note is, if I go back just over 12 months ago, we had huge trouble getting people to use Skype. And we had a 2-year plan to move to Office 365 and Teams by 2022, and we had to accelerate that 2-year plan into 3 months. So we have learned Office 365 and Teams as we go along, which sort of put the plan in the bin and says that we just need to figure this out. So for us, it's Teams, but there's lots of technology out there. I've used Miro with CBI. I've used Zoom with some external networks that I've got. I think it's just about assessing the technology and make it work for you, rather than selecting one in particular.
Great.
Liz,
Thanks ever so much,
jump in and
Jodie.
say, I think Jodie's absolutely right. Just in the interest of fairness, we're big fans of Teams as well, but for everybody watching from a technology firm, other collaboration platforms are available.
Other collaboration platforms are available, everyone. Don't you forget it. I'll thank you to our sponsors, Microsoft. Joe, I just wanted to come back to you, Joanna, on this intergenerational thing. You mentioned you've got, at the moment in the office, new starters. Now, I might be wrong in assuming that those new starters tend to be of a younger age. I might be wrong in assuming that, but the onboarding thing is a big concern, and we have a new starter in Tortoise. I've worked with her before in a different company. She's absolutely brilliant, but she's joined when we've all been working virtually, and she's finding it really hard. I know she's not doing her best work at the moment because it's just really weird. You can't like figure out how stuff works and whatever. So you've made a call that if you are a new starter, you have to come in. And
yes,
how have you found the different responses of people who are perhaps sort of longer serving money penny people, or just further on in their careers relative to the young people? Do you see a pattern of who wants to work in and who wants to work out?
yeah, so we've almost got different cohorts at the moment in the office right now, and with tons of space, so that isn't an issue. And we're testing, I must say, we're testing once a week. Anybody who comes in has to have a test and send it in once a week.
Right.
So we've got new starter cohorts. We've had, I think, 350 new starters since the end of July. We have people who really, really struggled with their technology at home. They just couldn't do their jobs, and so frustrating for them. So they're in a safe space as well. Anybody from a mental health perspective that actually was not good for them to be at home for whatever reason, they're in the office, and we're embracing that as well. And then we have a whole cohort now with everybody else that's still at home. There are, if you looked at the people who cannot wait to get back to the office full time, and this was data that came through the workplace bot as well, is that the vast majority of the younger generation want to get straight back to the office and don't really want an element of home working. That could be because of what we do. We can deliver a wide range of working patterns to suit people's lives, particularly with the challenges of homeschooling. We're 24/7, so we've got a lot of flexibility, but what we can't offer is flexible working on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't work for our business model. So you do know what your working pattern is going to look like, and I think when those times are set, people, the younger generation, actually would rather do it in the office.
Interesting. Matthew, did you just put your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to come in, and I think Joanna's made some great points there. One of the things that we've got in this guide to help companies work through is absolutely around the sort of recruitment, development and onboarding of people, because it's such a crucial part of the jigsaw, I think. And for me, I think some of the questions to ask are around working out, what sort of training can be delivered remotely and what's better on location. How can I replicate on-the-job training and learning? And also, how do I do onboarding in that sort of hybrid setup? And I think a few of the practical things that we've uncovered and got some case studies on. I think, firstly, there's something about just dividing up, actually. Some of the more learning and theory-based learning, perhaps that can be done online. But if it's practical skills or behavioural stuff, that really does lend itself to being in person. I think point number 2, actually, is I encourage companies, when the moment is right, considering sort of designating in-person days for all team members, because you kind of need that team building thing to take place from time to time as well. And then the third tip would really be just about this point on embracing technology, so that people can share real-time advice. And that's the best way at the moment of getting over that on-the-job learning that we're so hard to replicate otherwise. So there's plenty in there and a few examples and case studies. I encourage people to take a look at that on the whole piece around recruitment and onboarding and so on.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. There's some really, really good questions coming in from people watching, so I want to make sure that we've got time to cover most of these. A sort of relatively quick practical one for you, Jodie, from Carolyn Hawley. Without desks and ergonomic checks, etc., and a more informal collaboration space, so as you adapt your working space to be sort of more for brainstorming or workshopping things, what have been the health and safety challenges for your organisation? How have you had to sort of deploy different lenses or making sure it's all safe?
Yeah, well, there's a few different lenses to it. We have the health and safety requirements for home working, and we had a lot of challenges in the early days around DSE at home for a temporary workplace. And we did do a bit of make, do and mend, as most organisations did in the early days. And then we took the decision when we moved to hybrid working to say, well, we'll provide the exact same setup at home as we do in the office. So we've shipped chairs and desks, etc., to home addresses, as well as all of the sort of hardware and technology that comes with it. In the offices, we are still working to COVID-19 secure measures, so we haven't been able to do that much with the collaboration space, permanent space we talk about, because we want to see where the roadmap takes us, what social distancing measures in place before we invest in that. But clearly, any sort of physical changes we'll make to the environment in the long term will follow full risk assessments and see how that works. But we aren't doing that yet, because we don't know what the new workplace is going to look like post June the 21st, if it happens then.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jodie. Okay. I'm going to get back to a sort of cultural point, and we talked a little bit about this before we started, which is this sense, and there are questions coming in about, in our efforts to create a really good hybrid working model that, to your list, Joanna, works for customers, works for the business in terms of profitability and growth, and works for people in terms of mental health and well-being and all of that stuff. Is there a danger that if we create a sort of two-tier system where the people who tend to like to go in become one club, and people who tend to prefer to work from home, where it works better for them working from home, become another club? Will that disadvantage, for example, people who are working from home in terms of visibility and influencing and getting promoted and all of that stuff? And arguably, there's another question here which I think is interesting, which is, what if the sort of vibe of the office changes because it tends to be the younger people who are in, and then the more sort of older people who might have more caring responsibilities or live a bit further away from the office, for example, don't feel like it's inclusive for them? I mean, that's one scenario. Joanna, how are you going to think about all that stuff? It's quite a big cultural conundrum, isn't it?
Welcome to my head list. Yeah, big conundrum. Let's go back to the point of everybody's an individual, so that's really important. Everyone's going to want different things, and as leaders now we have to be multi-skilled at engaging everybody. I use workplace a lot, which I mentioned. That creates that sense of one family. Being able to share information, have a direct conversations with people. So whether you're in or whether you're not, you've got access to the same information. I used to think that we had a brilliant culture because we've got the most amazing office space.
It looks lovely, I have to say, very fancy.
We think this is normal. I know it's not. I used to think that it was all as a result of the office space. It's not. It's a result of how you treat people, how you care for them, and how you treat them as individuals. And so I just think our jobs have got infinitely harder. Culture is a huge opportunity for us. It's our foundation for everything. And so I think what we've got to do is to say, this could be an issue, this could be an issue, and this could be an issue, and you just need to plan around it. Take it off in little bite-sized chunks and say, okay, if the majority of people that are here all week are the younger generation, how are we going to make sure that people mix and that you've got that engagement? We will have whole company days in, maybe once a week. We will have whole team days in. Teams are a mixture of different people from different backgrounds, different ages. So I just think we have to look at all the detail and make sure that you've got a really robust plan for it and not be frightened by the big problem.
So Joanna, you obviously have set up monitoring and tracking and engagement tools. The workplace thing, is that the Facebook system? I think, is that part of Facebook? Yeah, that help you to sort of see, and then when people start coming back, you'll be able to tell if a problem is emerging that you can kind of course correct quickly. I think that makes sense. Matthew, were you about to jump in then?
Yeah, we're just going to build on what Joanna was saying, actually. I mean, a few thoughts on this, how you avoid the fragmentation that you were talking about, Liz, in a sense. I mean, firstly, I do think what Joanna has said, really important to have the sort of whole organisation, whole team people in designated days, even for those who are biasing towards working remotely and so on. So that would be sort of point number one. Second, I think, which we've not touched on yet, is I really think it's important that companies invest in training managers so that you get this sort of, how do you appraise and assess, and for all those things around promotion and fairness and so on, people regardless of where they're working, either remotely or in the office. It's got to be neutral across those, and that requires a different type of management, I would say. So invest in that training would be the second thought. And then the third really would be just to say, spend as much time working with and engaging and explaining to those people who are in the office or in the workplace as you do working remotely, so that you try and mitigate against that sort of have and have not culture, for example. I think I would say really spend equal amounts of time with those two groups in terms of working it through and the approach that's being taken and why and so on, so people can understand and buy into that.
Jodie, what do you say? This is a question here which I think is talking directly to this pressure, and it is something that I am anxious about. I'm anxious about it in terms of gender opportunities particularly. How do you create a level playing field for career advancement in a hybrid model when presenteeism and visibility are key factors in getting recognised by leadership? I mean, everybody knows that presenteeism is bad, and I don't think there's a manager left in the land who literally thinks, well, the person that stays latest longest gets the job. But there is a factor, isn't there, of if you're not there to be sort of part of the conversation, it's much harder. How are you going to sort of mitigate against this coming by accident, against all your best intentions? If it starts to emerge, how are you going to mitigate against it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it goes back to the point a few of us made around looking at the whole system. So this is not about, here's your hybrid work and that's it, let's move forward. It's looking at through the whole system and how that impacts our culture and how you measure that. So I'm always a big believer on what you measure gets done. So we're very clear on what our corporate measures are and the success of our new working model. So we look at it through the lens of engagement. So we've got a regular emoji server that goes out, and you click what emoji you're feeling at that moment in time, which is a fantastic tool. It takes a second and we get some really good feedback. We have our more formal Net Promoter Score for employee engagement, which gives us a much more detailed review. We also look very closely at productivity. We shouldn't shy away from saying we must continue to be productive in whatever model we introduce. And we look very closely to that around how time is charged, what time you booked to which project, that sort of thing. And a big thing for us is access to talent. So how has this helped access to a much broader talent pool, and therefore what impact is that to our ED&I measures? And that sort of answers the question around, well, if we measure ED&I and it's important to us, then therefore the ability to grow careers here is very important, and things like that. So it's all about the measurement for me, and making sure that we stay true to that in terms of our corporate measures and what the board want to see, and therefore what our members want to see as a company limited by guarantee. So yeah, really strong measures that link to the culture is going to be really important in that.
It's a high effort thing, isn't it? It's a high input,
Absolutely.
high awareness thing. And this question from Stefan Kukula, leading on from the two culture issue, and you just mentioned ED&I, is there a risk of initiatives on ED&I becoming diluted? And this is Stefan's words, and pockets of harassment, or in inverted commas banter, becoming established as normal if working groups are sort of less visible. Does that make sense? What do you think, Jodie? She's sort of thinking, how does that work? I suppose it's about visibility, right? And the ability to sort of feel the culture as well as try and set it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And for me, that's about having the right processes in your business to shine a light on things that may not be in accordance with our culture and our values. And I think that's the case whether we're a hybrid workforce or not, actually. Yeah. And again, that also goes back to role modelling and the behaviours that we set as an organisation as well. But the processes in the business should hopefully address that.
Yeah, thanks, Jodie. Joanna, I'm just going to come back to this question about choice. So two-pronged question. Firstly, a sort of small one, which is you mentioned that anybody who comes in must have a COVID test at the moment, and there's a question that's been posted, which is, I thought legally you can't insist on testing, it has to be voluntary. I'm just interested to know how you kind of position that. And then secondly, in a sort of bigger picture question, when you've sort of worked with the individuals, you've surveyed them, you said what would you like, what is the degree to which an individual can literally choose, and what is relative to, well, in general, people seem to be saying sort of this, so this is what's going to work for this team or department. What's the degree of personalised choice in the hybrid solution that you're going to be allowed to get?
So the test question first is that we've gone out and said, we would really love it. This is the way that we talk as well. We would love it if you're going to come to the office that you can keep yourself safe and your people around you safe and keep everybody at Moneypenny safe by having a test. We'll send you on. If somebody phoned and said that they really didn't want to do it, this is my reason. We would never force anybody to do that, legally or not. It's the wrong thing to do for that person. Yeah. So just stay with that. And for us, it's all about you do the right thing for that person for that reason. So in terms of what that future model looks like, I don't want anybody that's 100% working at home, even if that's what they wanted. I think that would be detrimental to the overall culture of the business. And frankly, yes, we've got all these tools that you can deliver culture from home, but it makes my job too difficult. And I think we dilute who we are as a business if we go and do that, and it's not good for our clients. So in my perfect world, we would have a hybrid model whereby you're in the office 3 days a week, maybe 2 days a week, and you're at home for the rest of the time if that's what you want to do. And we have, no matter what team you're in, what department, you have to prove that you can work just as efficiently at home as you could in the office. I think that's really key. What I can't do is go take a slip in productivity because we want to. We'll go and do the right thing in the right way. I will take full responsibility for making sure that we can allow somebody to work from home and give them the tools and the resources that they need. But I have to have that level of productivity in the business.
So in the case of Moneypenny, it's sort of a means tested benefit a bit, that if you can demonstrate you can do it, then we're very comfortable for you to design your working scenario within these parameters. in the case that somebody can't demonstrate that, will they be made to come to work into the office even if that's not what they want?
I think it will be very clear to everybody who are a member of our teams that those are our parameters. That's our, I like to use the word rules, but that's how we work. That's what's best for us. That's what's best for our clients. That's what's best for each other. So yeah, I got to be very careful that we do the right thing with the right people and take that responsibility for, if somebody really wants to work at home and they're brilliant, let's help them succeed in doing that. And it might be more than we can choose sometimes, but we'll certainly do our best.
Yeah, okay.
I feel it's sort of the sort of nub of the question that every organisation in the land is grappling with, in a sense, is, you know, how much is this individual choice and how much is it organisation and team-based sort of decision? And I think, you know, you've got to get the flow right, in a sense. You've got to start by saying what's right for the whole organisation. Then you sort of go down a tier and say, actually, how do I make sure that teams all work effectively and function well together and so on? And then within that, having set those sort of broad parameters, you then have the conversations around what is the individual preference, but within that framework sort of thing. So you need to go organisation, team, individual, I think, and work it through in that order.
Yeah, and I suppose remain live to the fact that you might, the first go might not be the right one, and you have to sort of adapt and tweak and twiddle as you go along.
And I think that's right, you know, I mean, not every organisation is going to be able to do that, but you might actually, particularly in larger organisations, individuals might say, actually, this is kind of my preference for how I might work in the future, and it could be that their existing role doesn't suit that perfectly. But there could be a moment in the future in the organisation where similar-ish roles would enable that greater degree of flexibility. And I think most employers would then have a conversation with that individual to say, look, do your skills match up? Is that an opportunity you'd like to take advantage of? And one that we can facilitate. And that's kind of where you get to it, through conversations with individuals.
Yeah, great. I want to leave a couple of minutes at the end to do parish notices from the week with Matthew. But before I do that, just a sort of final question to Jodie, and then I'll come to Joanna. Jodie, we've done 12 months of home, initial chaos, then a bit better, and now worrying about what comes next. What are the sort of one or two, I mean, you're a people and ops person, so you look at this stuff really closely and analytically and future thinking and all the rest of it. What are the one or two aspects of the future workplace that you would say are most critical for attracting and retaining the best people? Because that's one of the really big opportunities, that when we settle into a mode of working for normality, then in terms of growth and opportunity, that's one of the really big things that organisations want to lean into.
Yeah, great question. So when you look at the mega trends, which I do quite a lot around what does the world of work look like, there's three strong elements that are coming across very strongly. One is health and well-being. It's out there in the world now. It's less taboo to talk about mental health and managing your health more effectively. So creating the right culture and therefore the right process and systems to enable to be a healthy and well employee is going to be really key. There's a quote that I'll never forget. One of our employees said, "I'm no longer working from home, I'm now sleeping at work." And it's sort of stuck with me. And we've done a lot in terms of managing that and being able to switch off and things like that as well. So health and well-being is very strong, and making sure the company policy and therefore culture is clear on that one. Second one is sustainability. We're seeing a lot more of our prospective employees asking around what our sustainability roadmap is, what our commitment is to that, which is, I think, has accelerated as a result of COVID-19 actually. And then the third one is making sure that our culture and values matches what actually happens when you get here, and making sure that our words match our actions. And I think those three things are going to be super important to continue to recruit excellent people.
A very wise man once said that the difference between a good company and a terrible one is the good company does what they say they do, and the terrible one doesn't. And I think that's a helpful rule of thumb. Joanna, a last question for you, slightly different. you've got you've got over 1,000 people in your organisation split across 3 sites. I just wonder, what's your sense as a CEO of how people are feeling at the moment in your crew? Because there's sort of a bit of excitement at the possibility of being able to see your mates and have a barbecue and, you know, go swimming and what have you, but some anxiety too. I just wonder, what's the general vibe at Moneypenny? How are people?
I think all of us have been on an emotional roller coaster. We're all at different points of the roller coaster at different times, aren't we? And we're seeing that across the business. I think there is a big sense of relief that there's a little light at the end of the tunnel here. I think people have just had enough. We rolled out the car map, access to the car map for everybody. We've got some counselling helplines both for our people and their families as well, which have had a lot of use, and that's just been increasing over the past couple of months. So I think people want to get back to some element of normality. Our people in particular, we have traded really well. And so they are also very grateful to have a job. And we've really tried, I hope that they would back me up on this, we've really tried to treat them as best as we possibly could all the way through. So yeah, hopefully we're all grateful that the business is still here and still survived, and you know, we're all still here. And that we've allowed this home working model, and that we're all going to get back to some element of normality. And we've got a pub here, just down here, we've got a pub called the Dog and Bone, and the big thing everyone wants to do is have a Friday night drink in the pub and just feel a bit like normal.
Yeah, I mean, amen to that, Joanna, absolutely. Matthew, parish notices time, what's happened in the last week? Things people need to know about. We normally do this at the beginning, but we think we might do it at the end. Where are we at with government announcements and all that? Cheers.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks, Liz. Just to close out with this, I would say, and firstly, we've touched a little bit in the conversation around workplace testing, and just to remind you to people now that is available to all businesses. There was previously a sort of 50 employee and above threshold where you got that government support. That is now extended to all. If you want to take advantage of that, a reminder firstly to firms, you need to register by the end of this month. So just sort of 2 or 3 weeks to go on that now. So make sure you do if you want to take advantage of that. Second thought would be, as part of the roadmap, we know that the government have got sort of 4 official reviews taking place within that roadmap that will complete over the course of the sort of key dates. A couple of those to draw out in particular. We're working with the Cabinet Office around this idea of COVID certificates and wanting to test appetite amongst businesses. You know, would that be helpful to you or not? Do you think they have a role or not to play in that? So if people have got views on that, please do get in touch with us. And then the other review we've made a good progress on in the last few days is around this global travel task force. So the critical issue of international travel, for example. There are a number of roundtables taking place with the Department of Transport. I think they're really keen to hear not just from the sort of operators, so the airlines and so on, but critically the users of international travel, including business people and so on, looking at a range of themes from consumer confidence through to the logistics at the border, through to how does the UK engage internationally with other countries and so on. So again, if people are interested in feeding into that, please do get in touch. And then the final thing, just to really bring us up to date, I would say, is the safer working guidance, which we knew existed right at the start of the pandemic in different workplace settings and so on. The business department are just reviewing those at the moment to say, given what we know now, are those all still bang up to date and fit for purpose? That review closes this Friday. So if there are pieces within that guidance that firms say, actually, it'd be really helpful either to get this additional clarity, or if it was tweaked in this way, that'd really help us, please do let us know on that. In particular, we're keen to sort of hear from firms, how are you thinking through the interplay of all these various issues, from everything from vaccines and testing through the PPE kit in workplaces to the distancing guidance and so on. If there are things that can help give greater clarity and improve that, please do let us know. And for all of those, we'll pop details in the chat along with the guidance that we've been talking about today on the hybrid working setup.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Matthew. Thank you so much to both Joanna and to Jodie for a really stimulating and interesting, and I hope useful conversation about this. There's so much to think about, and all the very, very best of luck with getting your people back in and setting them up and going through the next sort of phase, 3 months or so of this. It's been really brilliant this morning. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you to everybody for joining, and we will see you again next Monday, I believe, at 10 o'clock. Thank you so much. Bye bye.